Welcome to Sober.Coffee, a weekly coffee chat sharing experience, strength, and hope for anyone on the sober road to recovery. You can download Sober.Coffee weekly on all podcast platforms and check us out on Instagram at Sober.Coffee Podcast and on Twitter at Sober.Coffee Pod. To learn more about us and to help support these sessions, visit online at Sober.Coffee. Here are your hosts, two guys on their own path to recovery, Mike and Glenn. Let's join them at the coffee shop.
Hola, Glenn.
Hey.
And a little Spanish there. That's all I got.
Man,
I know 25. So if you need 25 or something,
I'm not sure what either one of those are, but hey, man, it's always great to jump in the Sober Coffee Shop with you. We got our special table again today.
Yeah, we do.
And we have some additional insights with us today.
Yes.
Very grateful for that.
The softer touch. We have Cary with us.
Cary, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome
back,
back,
guys.
Cary.
Thank you.
So several weeks ago, we dropped, we try to drop on Sundays bonus drops. Right. And when we have guests come into the studio and share their experience, strength and hope, with those on the sober path of recovery, we drop them on Sunday. So several weeks ago, we dropped Cary's, but we asked her to come back to explore a really cool topic. So really excited about today, Cary. Always great to have you back. And thanks for the extra large black coffees.
Yeah,
it's
indeed.
Great. Fuel us up, right?
Fuel us up.
No problem.
So one of the things, that the big book talks about, that the, how it works talk about, the promises talks about God, right? Mm-hmm. And, that really was a deterrent for me in the first 5 minutes, as I was, thrown into AA, because God didn't work for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if this is a God program, this ain't going to work. I need to find something else. And actually, for a long period of time, I tried to find other things. I tried everything out there. And what the program says, it uses the phrase, God as I understand Him. Right. So that worked for me for a while. But recently, and again, we always laugh because there's not a lot of original thoughts. You hear the same stuff over and over again, which I like because I look at repetition as the mother of all knowledge. But I do like the original things and the new thoughts. And recently I heard this thought, God as I don't understand Him. And that takes me back to kind of the beginning, because God didn't work for me. So as we heard Cary's story and as we hear Cary in the rooms, God as I don't understand Him is probably a good topic for you to chat about. Just a lot of things about God that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. So Cary, great to have you. We're looking forward to this for the next 20 minutes or so, just exploring God or the lack of God, and the success of, living a sober life without a picture of God.
So you're turning that over to me now?
Turn it over to you. Let me ask you this. So what was your first reaction when, from a background standpoint, what did you come into the rooms with, and what was your first reaction when you read how it works and there's like 18 references to God, higher power, He, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah.
So, and I know a lot of people start the story with whatever their religious upbringing was, whatever their relationship is, what their religious upbringing was. And I was brought up sort of mixed. My dad was quite religious, quite spiritual, brought up in the Presbyterian church. And then I had a mother who had been brought up Catholic, who had walked away from the Catholic Church. And so I had that kind of confusing religious upbringing, which, I understand there's a difference between the religion and the spirituality. But so that was kind of confusing. My dad took me to church, and Mom sat home at the kitchen counter and smoked cigarettes. There were two different things, and she was angry with the Catholic Church for a number of reasons. And then I grew up and had my own, relationship and married somebody who was Catholic and converted to being Catholic. And then during my adult life, I wasn't so sure that religion or God was what was guiding my life or the people's lives around me. I'm kind of a believer in just sort of doing the right thing, and whether that's because God is out there saying do the right thing, or that he wants me to do the right thing. I'm not sure about that. I don't think that's not why I try to do the right thing. I try to, kind of live by the golden rule, which I know comes from Scripture, but it's very simplistic of, doing to others what you would have others do unto you. And I just believe that the world is so big, and there's so many people in the world, and there's so many personalities and brains and humans and interactions that I have a hard time wrapping myself around the fact that there's some God that is orchestrating the whole thing. Early in my sobriety, when I was first coming into the rooms, a great guy whose name is Ryan shared with me, when he could tell I was struggling, he shared with me the idea that one of the things that he did, which was he said, all I know is that I'm not God. And I have gone with that. And what I do as far as that is I say, I'm just not in charge of all these other people around me, whether they're my family, whether they're people that I work with, whether they're, the stranger on the metro, I'm just not in charge. So that's sort of my whole thing about God, spirituality. I'm not even sure what I think about the topic of spirituality, because I think, because I just think that there's too many human interactions that can go on, and too many, I don't know, weather, traffic, whatever it is, that I really have a hard time with that. So I just try to mind my own business, live my own life, doing the next right thing. And that's sort of my mantra, without relying on a God.
Man, that's great. And wow, what a great way to open up. So my, a lot of times in life, we always try to label things, right? And we try to label emotions or how we feel, like that is happiness, or that is, and I struggle with that, So when you first mentioned that, I thought of two words that start with A, and they're not Alcoholics Anonymous. It was, agnostic or atheist, and I have no idea really what the difference between those are. I mean, I have a very general, high level, but not enough to even talk about it. But as I look at my story, I see a lot of similarities. One is, I came in and God didn't work for me. Period. If this was a God program, this was a religious cult, I wanted nothing to do with it, right? But I started out, it talks about higher power, and I love the people, that say, well, use a doorknob for your higher power. To me, that just, that makes no sense, right? Because that doorknob's going to do nothing for me. I mean, I know what the doorknob's made of. I know how it works. It just doesn't work, right? But I think what they're trying to say, maybe, is just get outside of yourself, right? So I started in September of 2014. My higher power was the counselor. I sat on his floor on that Friday afternoon, and I'm like, dude, I will do anything you tell me to do. I mean, he was my higher power. He was my God in that moment. And then the guys in the program, the 8 guys that I was in the program with, they were my higher power. I did exactly what they told me to do. Then the rooms became my higher power. The 12 steps of AA became my higher power. My sponsor became my higher power for years. So as I look back, I spent a lot of time on step 3. And I spent a lot of time on step 3, right? Turn our will and our life over the care of God. There's that G word, as I understand him. Well, I didn't understand him, right? And so I spent a lot of time, and we've talked about on here some different ways. I went to church, I did YouTube listenings, I listened to insights, I read books, I got in the pool to try to figure it out. But the one thing that I came back to immediately in that September 2014 is I am no longer God. And it was at that point that things started to work. Growing up for me, my religion growing up, it was Christian, whatever, very judgmental, very damning, very rule oriented. I wanted nothing to do with that. I was never good enough. You always had to be better, never good enough. So, at that point, I'm right with you. God didn't work. I didn't understand God. Things didn't make sense. And I spent a lot of time on step 3. But what step 3 says, it doesn't say figure it all out. Step 3 says just make a decision, right? And so, yeah, I used, those factors as my higher power, those people or things as my higher power for a long period of time, and I still use those exact same people, to this day.
Yeah. I really appreciate your opening up about where you've come through, Cary, and Glenn, both of you. I come at this, a slightly different way. I came in with this concept of God. I came in with this concept that he was, making all those worldly decisions. I bought into that, right? And so for me, my program, I was able to zip through steps 1, 2, 3. I thought, boy, I'm going to be done with these in a day at this pace, right? So, and then I hit the rest of the steps, and then the natural cycle of life ended up playing out because I really had to invest time in those steps. But the reason that I'm so excited to be here this morning is that, I work with others, and, well, just cut to the chase. I've got somebody I love very dearly who's at the opening of the doors of AA right now. They're just beginning their journey, and they don't have the same concept of a higher power that I have. So I can't guide them to, because I can't force them to have my concept of the higher power. That's where I think the hardest thing for me working with other alcoholics is, I can't convey that piece. I can tell them to go to meetings, to keep coming back. I can tell them to sponsor others. I can tell them to serve the coffee. There are elements of activity that I can train on, if you will. But there are elements when it comes to spirituality that I'm not qualified to force my view and say, well, yeah, if you just embrace my sense of a higher power, giddy up, you're good to go. So the reason I'm here this morning is I want to hear the hope for these people that I'm working with that don't have that spirituality as most others do, but still succeed in the program. Cary, I so desperately want you to share you can succeed in AA without embracing everybody else's concept of what the higher power is.
That's a great point, and I think that's one of the reasons that I like to talk about the topic when I'm in meetings, is because I have heard of people who didn't want to join our illustrious club because it was spiritually based or faith-based or God-based or whatever. And I guess I want to share that it's okay. It's okay to, kind of like what Glenn was saying, it's okay to not really be sure. Use other things as your higher power. I've heard people say, they believe God works through people. So if you can grab onto that, then grab onto that. But my thought is, don't be afraid of AA or turned off by the 12 steps because you think that it's a requirement or it's going to be shoved down your throat, because everybody has their own relationship, and it's such a personal relationship. It's the most personal relationship you can have, is a relationship with the, with a higher power, or with what is your moral compass, what is making you do the next right thing. I know that my sponsor is very spiritual, very, she belongs to the Catholic Church. There's no question in her mind that God is not guiding her and is not there for her. So we sort of made it. She was wonderful though at that time, like, just know that you're not. And then she just advised me to just, if I were to pray, which I'm still not a good prayer, she wanted me to pray for strength to do the right thing, or pray that the right thing or God's will or whatever was going to happen. Now I'm not sure what. I don't think I ever took that completely on, but my point, and when I try to share, is just that it's okay, and it's okay for your loved one to, Glenn talks about how long he spent on that step. I honestly sort of skipped through it because I knew I would never get by it. I knew I would never get by it. So I came up with my own way to get through that step, which was to know that I'm not. And it has worked for me.
Yeah, so I just jotted down a couple things. As I worked, in no specific order here, but I'm working with a guy, and he's like, I just don't believe in God. He goes, Glenn, I don't think I can believe in the God you believe in. I'm like, well, that's not how this works. You don't have to believe in my God, my higher power. I have a God and a higher power that works very well for me today in relationship, not a bunch of rules, but a relationship that works very well. It doesn't need to be mine. You just, and I really broke it down to what you said before, Cary. You can't be God anymore. You can't be the God of your life. You got to get outside and use something else, right? For me, the step 3 and beyond, and still today, the relationship I have with my higher power, it took time. It is still taking time. It is a journey, not a destination. And part of that journey is I had to unlearn a lot of the bullshit that I grew up with. And I had to learn new ways of looking at my higher power and new ways of having a relationship instead of a fear-based, rule-based, kind of dude. Part of what, that I looked at, there was it's this book called Case for God. I think that's what it is. And there's a very award-winning investigative journalist, Lee Strobel. And he was, real popular in Chicago. And he went out purposely to disprove God. And that was his mission. And he said, I'm going to use all my investigative tools to prove that God doesn't exist, that God's fake, right? Well, he came back after his tenure on this journey and with, undeniable proof, in his mind that God exists. And for me, my higher power exists and I have proof, but yet at the end of the day, for me, it's a decision. I choose to believe in my higher power. I choose to believe in my God, even when in my mind it doesn't make sense. And it was funny, quick story. I was driving home from church one day with my stepson. He's 14 at the time. And the story in church was about Jonah and the whale, where this dude lived in Jonah, the belly of a whale for 3 days. And I remember we were driving home from church. He looks over, he goes, hey, man, what'd you think of that sermon today? I'm like, I thought it was good. He goes, come on. He goes, do you really believe that this man lived in the belly of a whale for 3 days? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, come on, man. He said, do you really? He goes, he says, that's scientifically impossible. And from the back and forth, it hit me very clear. And I remember this every time I start doubting or have, different decisions, whatever. For me, it's a decision. I looked at him, I said, you know why I believe? I said, I believe because I have decided to believe. Even though inside my mind it doesn't make sense, I am choosing to believe that. And he goes, really? I'm like, yeah, because at what point, it's just like believing the words in the big book. There's people that point and doubt and, they're the wrong words. Well, then what words do you believe? I think if you do that, you impede your own ego. And if you say, hey, that story, I don't believe that story in the Bible, well then what story do you believe? Right? And where do you draw the line? And who's making that decision? Just like in the big book, they're the wrong words. Well, then what words are right? And who makes them right? That's the own ego. So that's part of my surrender story. But, man, I'll tell you what. I am glad that there wasn't a God test, in AA, because I would have failed. And frankly, it's only from being in the pool, swimming in the deep end, over and over. Times I felt like I was drowning. Times I felt like, I wasn't getting it. And I still feel that way. I mean, there's still, I look at things and I'm like, man, I don't get that. But I continue to say, you know what? I choose to believe. But Cary, I also know that there's things you do, and you mentioned, kind of like living the next right thing, and you mentioned Buddhist or Taoism, or just a better way of living. It really helps fuel that next right decision.
Yeah, and I'm not saying either that this is the be all to end all, because guess what? When I was younger, I did believe. I've had experiences that I don't really want to go into here, but I've had experiences that have given me pause to believe. But yeah, I sometimes when I haven't done enough studying. I'd like to do studying of the world's religions. And kind of learn, more about that. But yeah, I think that Buddhism and is something. When I read about it, I think, yeah, that makes sense. And today I sort of would label myself an agnostic, but that's a person who's not sure. So again, I kind of go back to my whole thing. If just because I'm questioning it today doesn't mean it might not change later. Maybe it'll be the way it is forever and ever. But I'm glad that I didn't turn my back on AA because there was a lot of the word God. And I think that's my, that's my message for all of those people that are questioning or not sure that they think that this is the right thing for them. There's ways to get through that step. And like you were saying, the 30, spending a lot of time on it and then moving on, and then all of a sudden the reality is you're still working on it. And probably I'm still working on it too, because I think about it and I'm talking about it here. So
great point.
Anyway, that's my message.
This is really good stuff.
I have to jump in, just kind of the insanity. So my dad, and hey, his entire life, I've never seen him take a drink. Mm-hmm. And he lived his Christian principles till the day he died, and I respect that. But I can remember, this is kind of the insanity of the experience. I can remember sitting, and there was one time he came to live with me for a month because I couldn't stay sober. So, I said, hey, Pops, why don't you listen to these things, right? It's tips on way to live, right? So I read him like 8 Taoist principles, right? And he goes, man, they're amazing. He said, they are really good stuff. He goes, you would really benefit, if by putting those some in your life. I'm like, yeah. He goes, where'd you get them? I'm like, I don't know, this Taoist reading. He goes, oh my gosh, that stuff, I'm like, wait, you just said it was great, but now that I put a label on it, right? So that's the kind of crap. I love my dad, but that's the kind of crap that just didn't make sense.
Well, here's the other thing that doesn't make sense to me. I came into the program. My heart goes out to somebody who's coming into the program and they feel like a Democrat in a room full of Republicans. They're told what to believe and what not to believe, or a Republican in a room of Democrats. And they're not going to change their belief system. What my takeaway from this morning's coffee is there's hope. There is solid hope that you don't have to have that whole thing figured out. That's my takeaway, that to the next struggling person, and I've got them in my life, and maybe somebody's listening in their life right now, that they haven't figured it out. And what I heard today, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to think like Mike or like Glenn. You don't even need to think like Cary. You just need to go through the steps and work the program and come to a belief or continue the journey.
And the one thing I could underline at the end of all this, love that, I am not God.
I am not God. There we go. We all sign off today.
That's
We
awesome.
are not God.
Cary,
Right.
loved having
Yeah,
you here.
Cary, thanks. Please
Thank
come
you
back again.
so much. Yeah.
Excellent
Thanks,
stuff,
you guys.
Thanks for joining us for today's coffee chat. To contact the show, email us at podcast@Sober.Coffee. If you need immediate help, the AA hotline is 800-839-1686. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline is 800-273-8255. Remember, Mike and Glenn are sharing their own journey on the path to recovery. Any suggestions, medical or otherwise, are their own experiences and should not be viewed as professional advice. See you next week, and remember, there is a solution.
Stay safe in the city of Chicago. Beautiful city.